week on the SaaSy Sales Podcast, we meet Amber Banks, Director of Sales Enablement over at Justworks. We learn about what the modern enablement function does and the prerequisites for success in making the transition to this role. We cover what frontline managers need to do in order to get most value from enablement. And finally, we get into one of my favorite topics, how to create an inclusive workplace. Let's get into it. All right, so Amber Banks, Director of Sales Enablement at Justworks. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Nav. It's great to be here.
So to kick off, Justworks. Can you tell me a little bit about what Justworks does and who they serve?
Sure. So Justworks exists to help small businesses grow with confidence. So we handle all of the nitty-gritty payroll, HR, employee benefits administration, et cetera, on our customers' behalf so that they can focus on growing their business.
But it just sounds like you're taking away all the fun stuff. Don't I get to do that?
Yeah, no, the people are generally not too upset about letting that stuff go, that's for sure. We serve companies across the country, as small as 2 employees and anywhere, some of our customers are as large as 300 or 400 employees. Most of our companies are between 2 and 100
So
employees.
for the SaaSy alumni community listening, which the bulk of our community actually should be your customers, I'm just saying. So we'll leave that with them. But let's talk a little bit about your role at Justworks. So Director of Sales Enablement, for those who are getting familiar with the role, what does that mean in real life?
Yeah, I think it means something different to each business. For us, we are here to grease the wheels for the sales organization. So we work cross-functionally to make sure that the sales team has the right information, the right skill set, the right process and policies and product in place to successfully do their job.
Got it. And I know there are going to be a bunch of folks listening that are thinking about sales enablement as a career. So I've got a couple of questions about that. In terms of how you get to spend your time at Justworks, what gets you most excited and passionate about the role? What's the best part of your day and week?
My favorite thing about the role is it's something new every day. I mean, with a high growth company, any high growth company, there's always something new that comes up that we need to address. So I love the variety of the work that I do. I also really enjoy the cross-functional nature of the role. So we're really, building bridges with other teams. When companies grow very quickly, it's easy for them to become siloed and for those relationships cross-functionally to break down. And so we really see our team as, one of the bridge organizations in the business. And that's the thing that I'm most excited about.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you talk about the bridge, the cross-functional connections, it makes me think about an adjacent function, which is sales operations or RevOps, right? Oftentimes, They also are in the middle of all these different stakeholders. So for those thinking about making the move, I've seen really successful sales enablement leaders come from sales leadership. I've seen them come from pre-sales, solutions architecture, sales engineering. And probably those are the 2 most common ones I see. What do you think are the prerequisites for success, and how might you know that this path is going to be a good next step if you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot as I scale our team, and the red thread for the most successful folks on our team are really related to a couple of things. One, high emotional intelligence and empathy. You have to have a lot of empathy and act as a mediator between teams. It's really important that you're able to really put yourself in another person's perspective. The other thing is natural curiosity. You have to want to know why, and the level of detail that's required in this role is significantly greater than what you would experience in a sales leadership role, because you really need to understand all the mechanics behind how something works to ensure that something's not going to break down further down the process. So I would say those are the 2 big pieces for me.
Awesome. One of the challenges I've seen for sales enablement leaders is really getting the right level of buy-in, engagement, and commitment from frontline managers. So let's talk about that, right? I would love your advice for the frontline manager, how they maximize the value that they can get by having the privilege of a sales enablement function, remembering that, you know, it is a privilege. So I'd love to hear about the behaviors that ensure that
That's a great question. And, you know, it is a challenge, because particularly when you think about when sales enablement comes along, right? Like, you have scrappy frontline sales managers that are used to doing everything on their own. They've got a ton of stuff on their plate. And then sales enablement comes along, and there's this new organization that's starting to try to like take some of that weight off of their shoulders. And one of two things can happen in that case. Either the sales manager is like, fantastic, thank God you're here, take all of this stuff, I'm going to focus on coaching my team and getting business across the line. Or you have someone who's like, I'm really fearful of this change, I'm afraid of losing control, what's going to happen if you know, something goes sideways and I wasn't paying attention. And then they find themselves in every single meeting that I'm in, and then every single meeting that they already had, and then it becomes completely overwhelming. So I think it's really important to build a trusting relationship with your enablement team and have really clear, frequent communication. And don't be afraid to talk about feelings, right? Like, it is scary to let things go. And it is scary to put faith in another team for something, you know, as sensitive as your own revenue goals and your own team. So yeah, that would be my advice. Talk about it. Don't be afraid to have the hard conversations, and just like really build a trusting relationship with your enablement folks.
Great advice. You know, I think where I've seen people fall down a bit is not clearly delineating responsibilities. You know, now we have enablement. Here's what they'll do, and here's what you still have to do, right? One thing I'd love your thoughts on. I spent some time with quite a large company not so long ago. I mean, they would have had, you know, around about 1,000 people, geographically dispersed, center of gravity in San Francisco. They had a very capable senior director of enablement that came on. And what he was asked to do was basically to do the one-on-one coaching with reps, right? I want you listening to all the calls, finding out what they need, and coaching our reps. For me, that feels wrong. What's your perspective on this?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. Like that, I think that's taking enablement too far. And that's in my opinion, the most important thing a frontline sales manager could be doing is coaching their reps.
Yeah.
I think it's really important for a number of reasons. One, they need to know what their team is going through, and they need to build that rapport and that relationship and reinforce. I mean, that's not to say that enablement should not ever do that. But the primary responsibility of the sales manager is to coach. And then we should be stepping in as backup support to make sure that we're aligned. I think adding some coaching tools can really help with that. But yeah, it really needs to start with the frontline sales manager.
Yeah, you know what I think it was symptomatic of was the fact that the managers were defaulting to the common theme, which is that they feel like they need to be on every call because they are the best salesperson themselves, and therefore they don't have any time to actually coach. Because when I ask somebody, what do you coach? Oh yeah, I coach on every call. I'm like, no. Like, how do you know what they need coaching on? And are you setting aside time for a prescriptive coaching program, which Enablement's ideally set up for supporting in terms of architecting ways to do it, right?
Right.
But in this organization in particular, I'm pretty confident that it was the former. They were just managers being on every single call and not having.
That's super common, right? Like particularly in high growth, earlier stage tech companies that then all of a sudden grow up. The top reps are promoted, and then they become super reps instead of sales managers, right? And we've talked about this quite a bit in just our one-on-one conversations. And then you have the super rep that knows how to sell And that's how they know how to help their team be successful. And so they default to that. And then their reps become dependent. And then they end up carrying the book and selling, closing deals for 6 to 10 reps, which just simply isn't sustainable. So enablement really, if you're coming in as an early enablement person in that scenario, and the first thing you have to do is teach your managers how to coach and how to develop their people, and put the framework in place for them to do that.
One of the things that I've seen and I liked, I wonder if you've seen, is the concept of, if you're a new enablement head, sitting down and agreeing an enablement manifesto with the head of revenue. So this is why we have enablement, and and it's raison d'etre, as it were, so that everybody's on the same page.
I love the idea of that, and that's something that we've been talking about. We haven't actually implemented, and we're still running into some of that, like, whose lane is this, as we build this out. But I really like that. I think the more like alignment and documentation you have when you're building something like this out, the better.
Right. Well, let's switch it up, because you and I have done some work together, and in the past you've given me some really great advice in terms of being more inclusive in how we present and deliver our content, for which I've been really grateful. And I would love for you to share some of your philosophy and, if possible, some really tactical advice relating to creating an inclusive work environment to make sure that everybody's given the opportunity to fulfill their potential. So I don't know if you have a moment to think about that, but I'd love that.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about this quite a bit. We just went through a process to select a firm to help us implement sales methodology. And inclusion was a big part of our evaluation criteria, and has been a big part of my evaluation criteria since I've been in this role. And it's been quite surprising to me how glaring the gaps are for inclusion in sales training. And we've come a long way with diversity and inclusion. We have so far to go. Like, we're just barely scratching the surface. But where we've seen progress is, okay, we're seeing more women in sales, right? And that's great. But we're not seeing as many people of color or other underrepresented groups in sales. So we're ramping up our hiring efforts like everybody else, and trying to bring more people into the organization. And then we bring them in, and then we're like, oh wait, we haven't really thought about how to make them feel included, right? Like, now there are often people who feel like the other, and one way that we can do that is really look at the content that we're presenting, whether it's our own marketing content about our own brand or any of the partners that we bring in. And so I always ask myself, is everyone on my team represented in the content that I'm presenting to them? Can they see themselves as a successful salesperson in the content that I'm presenting to my team? And so that's become the litmus test for all of the partners that I work with and all of the content I'm looking at. And, frankly, we've reached a place as an organization where if that's not the case, then we won't move forward with that content.
I love that. I wanted to ask a follow-up question, but just for those folks who are listening, one of the initiatives we've kicked off at SaaSy is what we're calling the 100 plus 100. And I'd love folks to have a look on our website, because we have a scholarships program now specifically for folks who identify as underrepresented, and in all the diversity that encompasses, where we give free training seats as our small contribution to that. And so please, if you're listening, have a look at that. And if you identify as such or know someone who could you point to that, we'd love to have them join that. My follow-up question was, if you are somebody who experiences practices or behaviors in the workplace that do make you feel other, what's your advice for dealing with that? Because those are difficult waters to navigate.
It's tough. It's a tough place to be. And, I think, it's about communication, right? And I don't have all of the answers for this, but I can say that I have been in that situation in my career, and I can speak to what worked for me personally. And it really was taking a moment to sit with how I was feeling and try to, and trying to assume the best intent and having some really difficult conversations with some folks that I, interact with around how I was feeling. I also have been really fortunate in that I've had a lot of fantastic mentors over the course of my career, some of which were, other women who, experienced similar things, and others who are, white men who are senior in their career that I felt really comfortable having a conversation about how I was feeling with, and who gave me a lot of really good advice about how to communicate how I was feeling and ask for something different, and have the courage to ask for something different. And don't be afraid to lean on your HR team, right? Like that's also what they're there for.
You just sparked an idea for me, something we should do at SaaSy, is because we deal with so many small companies that don't even have a formal HR structure, and people, I'm sure, can feel quite isolated. Yeah.
Right.
I think it probably behooves us to figure a way to attract a group of such or said mentors that are prepared to provide ad hoc support. Because when you're a small company, and especially if you're a younger person, you don't have the network to reach out to, right?
Right. And what I've realized in the course of my career is, it's often not intentional. More often than not, it's not intentional. It's just, people start a company and they hire the people who will be willing to work for nothing, which tend to be their friends who tend to look very much like them. And then all of a sudden they're in a place where they need another layer of leadership. And those are the folks internally that are most qualified. So, I love the idea of creating a mentor network in our own community. I think we could all certainly be doing more of that.
Yeah, I want to throw in a bonus comment from mine, if I may, because something I learned myself last year, there was a gap in my hiring process with respect to reference checking. So as you think about hiring people, ensure you have diversity in your reference checking, because I was guilty of allowing somebody who was quite the chauvinist get hired, because in retrospect, when we look back at it, we realized their references were all Caucasian males of a certain age, right? And I've never heard any hiring process insist on diversity in references, and it just hit me like a brick. I was like,
no, I mean, I haven't either, but and it's really interesting to think about that, because there are certainly environments where that just wouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and think about that for a moment. Like, there's certain, I've certainly worked with customers over the course of my career that had all Caucasian male teams. I mean, you're seeing that less and less today, but yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, what happened was this person walked into a diverse environment and just wasn't behaving appropriately. And I was like, how did we miss that? And that's why. That's why. Well, on to some more fun stuff. My favorite bonus questions for folks that give us their time is your personal philosophy when it comes to working. Do you have something you'd like to share based on your journey?
Yeah, I mean, my personal philosophy has evolved over the course of my career. I think that it is, I've recognized as I've gotten further along in my career the importance of taking a step away and having room to reflect. When you start your career, at least for me, it was like go, go, go. I was on 24/7, constantly working, not leaving a ton of room outside of that in my life for all of the other important things. And I realized that having that balance in my life and taking those steps away, not only individually, but also with my team, to have fun and to laugh and to take a moment to think and reflect, has made me a better leader, and has helped me my team performs better when I make that space.
Awesome. Amber Banks, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this. I know people are going to get a lot of value out of it. If they want to know more about Justworks, because they should, where do they go? Justworks.com?
Justworks.com. We've got a ton of great content on the site. Of course, I'm always here to help. So people can direct their questions to me. And if I can't answer them, I will put them in front of the right person. Matt, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.